we have a rampant bunny out. He's very curious. And also maybe wants to eat all the books. Hey guys, it's Bree. As you probably know, last month was the Owls Readathon and it was a fantastic time. I'm so impressed by everybody who was involved and the amount of work and effort they put into it. Like, that is just, my mind is still blown. I'm gonna go ahead and link in the description below the Magical Library, which I find super adorable. It's basically a spreadsheet that contains all of the different books that were read or were at least reported to have been read over the course of the readathon, and it's really cool to see. It includes things like what house people were in, things like what books were read, how many pages, and then reasons that they liked the book that they read or recommended. That to me is just like, it's super cute. And I like that. And I think it's going to create a lot of fun in November when we come back for the news. I won't lie, my time at the Owls was simultaneously super productive, but also mega disappointing. But let's go ahead and start with what I've read, because I actually read a lot. Over the course of the readathon, I read 12 books, which on its face sounds fantastic. We'll talk a little bit later about why I'm kind of disappointed, and it's a totally ridiculous reason, but we'll start with the good stuff. I started off the readathon really strong, reading Winter of the Witch and Saga Volume 9, and that right out the gate got me 2 books done in like the first day and a half of the readathon, which was fantastic. For the rest of the readathon, I have kind of my running Goodreads list right here. Pardon whatever weird thing this winds up doing to my camera. So let's go through it. I read Queens of Geek as my contemporary. I actually really wasn't feeling well that day, and so it was a fantastic time to pick up the contemporary. Queens of Geek is kind of like it is a short YA story about 3 friends who go to their first convention. They come in from Australia to essentially what's Comic-Con and have just this really interesting time where they learn about themselves, and of course there are romantic intrigues and things like that. And it is a very lovely, pleasant contemporary. A couple of things that I had issue with, but you know, you take what you get. I read Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson, which has been on my shelf for way too long. I mean, at this point, like a good couple years. And so I was glad to get that out of the way. I did a buddy read with KJ from Words and Ink, and that was fantastic. I'll go ahead and also link KJ's Twitter in the description below. It was really fun to have somebody to read it with and to kind of be like, oh yeah, no, what is happening right now? And then of course there was a really long like Twitter thread, which I really enjoyed getting to talk to people, and people who were just kind of wanted to let me know their opinions about the book. But then came my first real surprise read, and that is really the issue that I had with this readathon, is that I wound up picking up a ton of books by like just total impulse that took me off of my TBR and kind of ultimately led to a little bit of a downfall. I say that and it should be qualified because I did read 12 books, and that's pretty freaking impressive. I read Daisy Jones and the Six, and I actually listened to it on audio. I know this has been all the rage over in like the YA sector of BookTube, and like the more literary side, not so much in genre fiction. This was a lot of fun. As somebody who's a really big fan of Fleetwood Mac, you could tell that this was a story about somebody written by people who love that kind of time in rock history, or musical history, I guess you should say. It's a little bit broader than just rock. And you could definitely see the inspirations from the story of Fleetwood Mac. It was really interestingly written, and most importantly, the audio for that was fantastic. It felt, as you listened, like you were listening to a documentary or a docuseries, and that like the performance sold it for me. There are some issues that I have with the story, and I won't say that it's particularly surprising, but I think it does a pretty decent homage to the time period that she's referencing. I also read Bruja Born. This is by Zarita Cordova. I read this for Potions, and this is a really fun take on kind of the the teenage witch trope, but takes it and puts it in place of a Latinx or a Hispanic family, specifically one that is struggling to fit in their community with 3 teenage girls. Cordova has described it as Charmed inspired, and I feel that as somebody who spent a lot of time in the early aughts watching a lot of Charmed. Don't judge me. I feel those vibes, and I really dig what she's doing with this series. Again, some issues, but nothing that I think detracts from the way that I enjoyed the book, and things that I consistently think get better over the course of her writing career. See, the next thing I read, I actually listened to again. That is The Lady from the Black Lagoon. It's by Mallory O'Meara, and is about the woman who worked on the creature design for the creature from the Black Lagoon, and her kind of attempts to become someone in Hollywood makeup, and the way that, you know, in the times of the 30s, that just couldn't happen for her, and the ways that she was, her gender and her presence and her kind of her personality were kind of held against her in a way that was vastly unfair. And it's a little bit memoir too. Frankly, I really enjoyed listening to it, but this is right up my alley. I love creature design. I've watched like every episode of Face Off ever. I love Jim Henson's Creature Shop Challenge, and have seen everything like Doug Jones has ever been in. So this was peak something that I would listen to. I then read Outside the Gates by Molly Gloss. This is actually, hold on. This is a new re-release from Saga. Saga is re-releasing all of Molly Gloss's work. It's super short. And this is kind of almost this is a rougher read than I thought it was gonna be. It's about a little boy who's kicked out of his city, presumably for having magical powers. And while he's out there, he bonds with a man who's also been kicked out of the city, who kind of acts as his father figure. And some stuff happens that lead him on kind of this, what would be a grand adventure, but actually has a very low-key sad ending. I like this, and I think I have to think about it a little bit more before I'm ready to actually talk about it. I finally finished The Forgotten Beasts of Elle. This was fantastic because it doubled up on my herbology and Care of Magical Creatures prompts. It's about a woman who is a magician, or a wizard, I guess, and she's able to call these legendary beasts to her, but in the end it does not save her from becoming involved in kind of the travails of men, and from really sinking into some deep evil that she didn't foresee herself being a part of. It's interesting. I think McKillip's story is told kind of at a distance. It feels for me very separate from like the emotional journey of the character, even though it's supposed to almost entirely really be about that emotional journey. I'm not sure really if that's mostly the writing style or maybe also partly the plot construction, but I will think about that. I'm not sure if I have anything to say about McKillip as a writer yet. I think I have to read a little bit more of her stuff to really come away feeling comfortable saying that. And then the last two things I read in a panic on the last night, trying to get all of my prompts done. The first one is Silver in the Wood by Emily Tesh. This was, well, it was presumably going to be for my herbology challenge. Realistically, looking back, I should have read other things instead, but I did not. Fun fact, not so secret to the people who know me and love me in real life, but something I maybe haven't talked about on my channel is my deep and undying love for the Green Man. The Green Man is a kind of like Celtic pagan myth, basically a blend of the Forest King meets like kind of Fairy King. It varies, but is essentially like the protector of the forest kind of myth. And this plays off of that trope, and I love that. I'm still giving some thoughts to that. This is a part actually of the tour releases that are coming out in fall of this year, so I'll probably be lumping some of those reviews together in a bunch of mini reviews. But I have thoughts and I have feels, and we will talk about them eventually. The last thing I read was at like 10:30 at night. It was a total last-ditch effort to get as many things and prompts done as I could. and that is Joyride Volume 1. I read this because it has 2 authors. It is a comic and the script has 2 writers. It is about 3 teenagers who escape from a locked down version of Earth where there's literally like a shield around the planet. And they steal a spaceship and go on adventures and deal with the fact that they all have like basically personality issues and are teenagers. It's hard to be a teenager. All of the teenagers in the world are assholes, and I say it affectionately, but it's one of those things where their problems are definitely because they're like 15. And so I had a good time reading that. Here's the catch. I did not, if you pay attention to that list, read a book that starts with R. I was going to read The Raven Tower. I have it started on audio, and I thought after finishing Joyride, I was super tempted to read Ragged Alice, which is another novella that's out, I think either this month or next month, by Gareth Powell, because you basically have very limited options if you don't finish your Defense Against the Dark Arts prompt. If that owl is not complete, I didn't realize this when I started my planning, or I would have read The Raven Tower as like the 3rd thing I read, but I didn't. And so now my Newt's options are limited, but I'm okay. I'm past that. I have taken deep breaths and poured myself my glass of wine. Life is still going on. I had wanted at the start to have as many options as I could going into August because I'm going to spend a not small part of it on the plane and then in Dublin with Rachel and Claire and a whole bunch of other BookTube SFF people attending the Worldcon convention in Dublin. I'm not sure what that's going to mean for my reading schedule, but I wanted to kind of give myself all of the choices I possibly could. Just so that in that moment I could decide what I was feeling. And so now my options are limited, but that's okay. Let's go over what my remaining options are. Brock from Let's Read did a fantastic spreadsheet. He's amazing with spreadsheets. He's basically my like reading tracking god. And his spreadsheet kind of goes through and you can like check off all of the things you finished and it tells you what you are eligible to become. So I can become, keeping in mind, again, the only prompt I did not complete was Defense Against the Dark Arts. I can be an astronomer, an astrologist. I can be a broom maker, a herbologist, which is probably actually what I was going to go for initially, a journalist or writer, a magizoologist, which is fine. I could rock some Eddie Redmayne. And then I can be a potioneer, which I suspect is basically just a potion master, a seer, or a wand maker. So some of those options are still pretty interesting. And initially I had thought I was just going to go for herbology anyway. I just was also tempted by librarian because is there anyone who did this entire readathon who was not also tempted by being a librarian at Hogwarts or at some other like magical institution? So I'm a little disappointed on that front, but again, it feels really good to have read that many books. And I'm really glad that I did this readathon. It kept me like active on Twitter and I was constantly trying to read. And that's just a really good feeling, especially because my last year was not that great of a reading year. Anyway, let me know what you are now eligible for if you did the L's Readathon. I hope you guys had a fantastic time with it. I know I did. I'm still super, super impressed by all of the like Twitter trivia that was like obscure stuff that I would never have known. I'm impressed by everyone I know who answered those questions correctly. I will talk to you guys very soon. I will be coming at you first with a review of Test of the Road and then with my May TBR. So if you're a patron, keep an eye out because our book of the month selection will be up and sent out to you guys soon. You guys know the drill. Comment down below. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know how you're doing. Is your weather fantastic? Because my weather is starting to be fantastic and I'm really happy. Go ahead, like and subscribe. If you want to support the channel, you can go over and follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Those links are down below. And if you really are wanting to support us, you can go on over to my Patreon. Patrons get awesome things like early access to videos, and you get to help me pick out one of my TBR books for the month. So do the thing. I hope you guys are having a fantastic reading week. See you later.